Hey everyone, I'm Jen. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. If you are returning, remember you are loved. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, a muscle carc, a SERPA, a rape crisis counselor, a Narcan trainer, a syringe peer, the founder of Supplies for Life, and blah, 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 blah. If you look in my description box down below, you're going to find videos that I've done in the past, what my certifications mean, who I really am, things that I'm involved with, things that I've done, like Smack, the documentary that I was involved with while I was still in active addiction. Well, like 2 days sober, maybe. So, I have a special guest here with me today. I know in the past, some of you guys have heard me talk about, I have a friend who is a social worker and a counselor and who, is like one of my hugest parts of my support system. And her and I were talking last week and we were like, well, she really came up with the idea and I was like, oh my God, that's a great idea. So sometimes we don't have anybody to turn to that, has the professional advice that we need. So ta-da! This is my friend Bobbi Jo. Her and I met, probably about 2.5 years ago now, when I was fighting my custody case for Bella. I had to get a supervisor to supervise her and I, Bella and I's visits. And my lawyers actually, I don't even know how they found you.
Psychology Today. They looked me up on Psychology Today.
Okay, so she's on Psychology Today, whatever that might be. And they gave us these options, like 3 or 2 or 4 or 3, I don't even remember, so long ago now, people to choose from. And they then presented it to the other party's lawyer. And believe it or not, the other party chose this lovely lady right here. And she started by supervising my visits with Bella. I would have 2 supervised visits a week for 2 hours.
Yep.
Not nearly enough, but I was just grateful to have them while the other party was not supervising. And through all that, you spend all that time with someone, and she literally got to see firsthand the battle I was fighting and the bullshit that came along with it. And after it all was said and done, we've just remained amazing friends, and I am very grateful to have her in my life. And now her granddaughter and Bella play together, and she's just a pivotal part in my life. And it's all because of that connection that happened because of Bella and having to try to win custody back of her. So, who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? What's your story? Tell us all about it.
Okay, so Bobbi Jo Stone is my name. I was born in Newburgh, New York. Both of my parents are originally from Delaware County. So when I was 8, we moved back to Delaware County when my dad lost his job at IBM. And so I grew up in Walton. I have 2 older sisters. One of my sisters is a recovering addict. When I was 16, my sister went to prison for the sale and possession of crack cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what probably sparked my real curiosity in why addicts are the way addicts are, and it deeply affected my family. So I started to be a peer counselor for school, and I kind of knew at that moment, I'm going to be a therapist. I thought I was going to go into substance abuse, and I do have some background in substance abuse, but my mainstay is mental health. So I graduated from high school. I went into the Air Force. That was not my jam. I don't like folding my underwear into 6-inch squares.
Tell me about it, girl.
Right?
Just like Shock. I was like, man. But let me tell you, I could. Oh, here's Frankie.
Frankie and I are good friends, so it's no big deal, except for the tail. So, the Air Force.
Girl,
come on.
sit down.
The Air Force was not my jam, so I got out of the Air Force and I started working in a factory in Hancock, New York, with my dad, third shift.
Factory?
It was Bard Parker. I was making medical supplies, scalpels. And my first night of work, I said, no thank you, and I applied to college. And so I got a bachelor's degree in social work, and then I got a master's degree in social work, and I've held so many various jobs that I think really qualify me to, plus my personal experience, but my all the different jobs I have held really qualify me to help a wide array of individuals. And I know that when addicts are struggling, they're not just struggling with their addiction, they're struggling with all of the things that life has to throw at us. So I got my master's degree. While I was getting my master's degree, I worked for Child Protective Services for 15 years, both in Delaware County, and I did it in Flint, Michigan. I have been a domestic violence advocate and ran the domestic violence shelter. I am right now in private practice as a therapist. I have run Sullivan County's forensic program. I was the therapist to anybody coming off parole. I was the therapist to sex offenders, murderers, robbers.
Wide variety.
The wide variety. And I did some, in all of that, people had addictions. So I worked
As always.
So I had a lot to do. I ran a couple of substance abuse programs. And so that's where I'm at in private practice.
Mm-hmm. Accepting new clients.
Accepting new clients, right. Yes, of course.
Put that out there. So I think what we have decided is we are going to do a series of like CPS questions, anxiety, childhood trauma, what is re-traumatizing mean and what are certain things mean? And then obviously you guys also, as each video is posted, I will on Instagram each week post like what questions you have for Bobbi Jo with this topic. So you'll know what week, like you'll know what video topic it's going to be that week or the week before, because we'll do like a Q&A for it. So this way you guys can ask your questions and you guys can finally get some answers to the questions that you have. I will, whatever for substance use, whatever I can answer, I always will. But Bobbi Jo really has a lot of insight because she's worked at these agencies. So she's worked at these agencies and then she has personally navigated these agencies with family members as well. So she has seen it from both sides. So she truly is an expert with a lot of it. And, I think that will really genuinely help a lot of people because there's some questions I can't answer with absolute certainty, but I can kind of guess my way through it because they're similar. So I think, now that you guys know who she is and have a background of what she's able to answer and stuff like that, not only does she have a sister who is affected, she also had a daughter that is affected as well. So she has women, and she knows, she's been on both sides of the spectrum as far as being a CPS worker, but also having grandchildren who are affected by substance use disorder because of their parents' disease.
So if I may steal the show, I think this is a good time. I've been in my mind thinking like, how am I going to introduce this topic? So here we go. We're going to do it.
Okay. Go
Ready?
For it.
So, yes, I was a child protective worker for 15 years. I was also a certified foster parent and a certified adoptive parent. And I adopted a 16-year-old girl who was from the local area. And she suffered from a lot of trauma. Her parents were addicts. She went into foster care when she was 2. She was abused by her foster parents. She was then placed with another set of foster parents. She was adopted when she was 6. They abused her, including sexual abuse. So when she was 16, she went back into foster care and I adopted her. And although I have a background in mental health and addiction and I've got the license and I've got all the credentials, it was a struggle to help her. She had a lot of trauma. She had suffered with addiction. She struggled really hard to try and have a productive, meaningful life. When she was 18, she got pregnant. She and that baby lived with me in Michigan. She then met a man, seemed to have settled down, had 3 more children, got married, and then in 2017 decided that was not the life for her. She was not getting help for her mental health. So she left her husband and children, started dating a man who worked in the strip club where she was working. My understanding, because I was living in New York at the time, is that she started to dabble in the use of heroin. And this man was abusive to her. He beat her, gave her a brain bleed. She was in the hospital. So in, fast forward, July of 2017, she became a missing person. and she's been missing for 5 years.
I've posted links to her story in the YouTube community before, and a bunch of you actually commented saying that you lived in the area and you remembered the story.
So her daughter lives here in New York, and I have, through the court system, gained visitation of her and have watched her daughter struggle with all the trauma that comes with having a parent who's addicted and missing. And of course, I have contact with her 3 sons in Michigan and their journey. And so I do have a very wide experience, both from being the parent and the sibling of an addict, but also watching, her children grow and not grow or whatever, what have you, fighting that system. So I have a very wide array of experience that I think y'all can benefit from, and I'm open to you guys throwing out ideas of what topics you would like to cover, because it's time for me to share in honor of Brianna and to help people that need help. So here I am.
Right. And I think, so Bobbi Jo and I discussed this earlier, and I think that sometimes we have questions, right? And that's how we learn. We learn when we educate ourselves in whatever topic it might be. And sometimes having questions, these questions are difficult to ask because you don't want to, first off, you don't want to let anyone know your dirty little secret, or you don't want anyone to think you're stupid or question why you're asking these things or what's going on in your life, and you don't have a safe place to go and ask these questions. And sometimes when you can take a video like this, what we're going to do in the future, and actually listen to it in the privacy of your own home, your own car, your own time frame, and then have a safe place that you can ask questions with someone that you know and trust, like me. I think it just makes life easier. Like, I wish stuff like this existed when I was going through things, because maybe I wouldn't have felt so incredibly alone and unsupported. And I think moving forward, this is how we recover. We learn and we get better, and we talk to people who know what they're talking about. And I think this is truly going to help a lot of people besides myself, right? This is how I learn, it's how I grow. You guys might ask things that I never would have thought of or never looked at it that way. And then maybe somebody that I'm working with is also experiencing that, and I just think that moving forward, this is going to be really great. And please feel free to drop in the comment section down below if you guys, if there's a burning video that you really need, or, would you prefer for us to start on the addiction side or the mental health side? Like, what would you prefer to see as a first video? I was thinking, like, after this little introduction video, so you guys knew what was to come, then we can also go into what do you think because I always go with like stuff that's relatable to me, like anxiety and shit like that. But
yeah, so when we started talking about this, I made a list of things that I thought would be helpful, but that's that's from my experience. Like, when I looked at my own private practice and like, what are my clients suffering from, and what, where do they need the most help? And so one of the big ones is anxiety, depression, self-care, boundaries. I think a big one that's coming up is seasonal affective disorder, and how that affects us, and what does that mean, and how can I help myself with that? Being a step parent, I've been a step parent. That's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life, is be a step parent. CPS questions. What do you need to know about CPS? What are your rights? And just want to throw out there with, like, I can only answer New York and Michigan. Every state has different laws, and so I can only answer about New York and Michigan. What else was on our list, Jen?
There was a great list, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I actually, when you sent it to me, I read it to Jared, and he was like, that's a really good list. There's a lot on there. I think there was a lot of things to do with trauma.
Trauma bonds, domestic violence.
Ooh, yes. I feel like we should do a series, like different series. Like, one will do like mental health, and it'll be like anxiety, depression, seasonal depression, things like that. And then I think we should do one like self-care, self-awareness, things of that. Trauma bonds is that a hot button topic, and so incredibly common, never talked about, And a lot of people hear that and they don't even understand what it means. And trauma bonds does not just go along with domestic violence. It goes along with parenting, relationships,
work.
Yeah, oh God, like everything. Like there's, sometimes we don't realize the things that we do in life and the connections that we quickly grasp at with people is because of the trauma that we've suffered, in our lives. So I think that's really an important one. Out of all the things that we just said, please comment below which ones, you are in a hurry to see, and whatever gets the most votes, so to speak, is, what we can start with.
I thought on the way here, because that's, what you do when you drive is you think. I thought also, I have heard a lot when people come to me in my private practice, they're like, oh, thank God I found you. I've been looking for a therapist for so long. And so I thought one of the other topics that we might be useful, maybe it's not, you can let us know, is like how to find a good therapist, what to look for in a good therapist, community resources, things that you don't know.
Yeah. And I think people also therapists are not one size fits all, they're not like just one flavor of potato chip. Like you really have to find one that works for you because you're going to be doing really difficult things together. If you don't have a trust and you don't have a relationship with the person that you're working with, it is absolutely not going to work. And I always encourage people, like, here's 3 names, pick one, talk to them all, sit down with all of them and have a conversation. Because I dare bet you out of the 3 that I give you, there's one you're going to love, one you're going to hate, and one that maybe, and I think that's natural. And I think you need to really sit down and have conversations with all of them to find out who fits you best. Because what works for me, just like with recovery, with dieting, exercise, activities in general, everything in life, what works for one person is not going to work for another because we're all unique.
We're all unique, and you are all unique, and us therapists, we're all unique too. I have a certain style. I'm not, I'm not the warm and fuzzy, let me hold your hand, how does that make you feel?
No.
Not that I don't care about that, but for me, it's more like, okay, what's the problem? How do we fix it? And what's the plan? And what's your goal? And how do we get there? And I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to call a spade, and that's too much for some people. And I'm sorry.
I think sometimes at different stages in your life, you need a different type of therapist. Like for me, for the stage that I'm in my life, I need someone who's going to be like, bitch, you know better. Like, come on, you career-wise, professionally, personally, you know better, and sometimes I need someone who's going to call me on my shit. So I occasionally need someone who's going to cuddle me. Of course, I think that's the reality of life. But I think right when you're coming out of that traumatic situation where you're still very, very, very broken and hurt and you need a cuddly one. But once you get to a certain point in your life, you need someone who's going to be like, let's really talk about this. Like, what's up. You stop selling yourself short, or let's set some attainable goals, or whatever the case may be, and really go from there.
And it's interesting that you say that. So like when I have a client who has had a traumatic, event, and they're really in it, I can be in it with you, and we can be there. But I always say to them, okay, so like we can visit depressive city, but we're not going to move in, right? Like let's be there, let's feel it, let's process it, but we're not going to live there forever. And so when I say, like, I'm not the kind of person who's just going to be like, how does that make you feel? Your feelings are important. What I mean is, like, I will honor and help you work through those feelings, but I'm not going to help you stay stuck there.
I think that's very valid. And I find that sometimes, unfortunately, we go through these things and we don't process them properly. And they're so fucking heavy that we get stuck in them. It's like we get cement boots and we get stuck there. And that's what keeps us sick. Like, I know for me, for decades, as you all know, I did not process my childhood trauma. And it literally ruled me. And it literally controlled every aspect of my life, every decision I made, every direction I went in. And it was not beneficial in any way, shape, or form until someone in shock, actually, my counselor, had the amazing idea of writing a no-send letter. And when that wasn't powerful enough, she made me read it out loud. And hearing my own words and seeing people's reactions to the things that had occurred made me finally realize that I was not the broken component. I was a child, and those things that happened were not okay. And it was not my fault. And I was finally able, because I got to see it on someone else's face, I got to finally understand I didn't have to carry that anymore. And it wasn't just me who was there. And I don't know, it really did something for me that nothing ever did before. And I'm eternally grateful for that process, because I'm as past it as I am, which I'm not saying I'm over it, but I'm as past it as I am because of those activities and because I had that space to do that. And hopefully that will provide some of you with that here.
It's actually a very good therapeutic tool, right? So like to write it down, get rid of it, send it away, put it in a bottle, burn it, whatever you're going to do with it. A no send letter is an amazing. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, I am more like action oriented. Like, how are we going to resolve this trauma? And so I think people struggle sometimes with nothing changes if nothing changes. And so I expect my people to work.
Right. Well, that's the whole point of it. Right. You know, I've gone and sat with a lot of therapists, and I feel like we talk about the same thing every time. And I mean, sometimes you have to beat it up to get rid of it, but sometimes also, like, it is what it is. It's not going to be any different. Let's not re-traumatize ourselves another time and telling the same story, and it just, whatever. So I hope you guys are going to find this really helpful moving forward. And, you know, I look forward to doing these and seeing your guys' reaction. I appreciate you being so open and willing to doing this, because I think it's going to be awesome. I know I'm going to learn a lot, and anytime I can learn anything to help the people I'm working with, that's always a benefit for me. Yeah. And we will see you guys all very soon. I'm hoping we are going to post something once a week, and we will go from there. And remember, we recover loudly, so those behind us do not suffer in silence. Bye.